Welcome back. Our next guest is a corporate executive who believes the recent resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, or the announcement that he will resign, triggers uncertainty within this country's manufacturing sector. For more on the sector and what he sees ahead, let's bring in Iggy Domaglaski, CEO at Wajax. Wajax is a seller of equipment used in several heavy industries, including construction, mining, forestry, and material handling. Iggy, thanks a lot for joining us. Iggy joins us from Calgary, Alberta. This is an interesting take. Why do you believe the exit of Justin Trudeau from leadership in this country poses serious questions for industrial policy here in Canada?
Well, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. I think regardless of what government comes in, I think any leader would be challenged to ignore or harm the manufacturing sector. It makes up 10% of Canadian GDP. And there's nearly 2 million Canadians that are part of the whole manufacturing sector. But depending on who comes in, I think there will be just different winners and different folks who don't gain so much. I think part of it has to do with what happens with environmental regulations. If certain leaders will likely increase environmental regulations and increase the sustainability agenda, which I think will do wonders for technologies like battery or solar and renewables. And then other leaders have talked about really reducing environmental regulations, fast-tracking projects, which I think would see some benefit to more of the oil and gas producers out west who would likely increase production and potentially be able to lower costs in a less regulated environment.
You're clearly referring to Pierre Poilievre in the second instance there. He has pledged pretty loudly to get energy-related projects moving more quickly. What is your view of that scenario?
Well, I'm a believer that Canadian energy is some of the most responsible energy in the world, and that even if the world is moving off of oil and gas, that Canadian oil and gas should be looked at as a beacon of sustainability and of doing the right thing. So I'm a believer that continuing to build these Canadian projects is a really good thing for our country, and it really provides the foundation and the wealth that all Canadians have come to rely on for their standard of living.
Would you like to see additional liquefied natural gas facilities on the west coast of Canada?
You know, we've managed to get 2 approved. So there's one big one and one little one that's just getting going. And if you look at the United States or countries like Qatar, they've, in the same period of time that we've been able to get 2 done, have been able to get dozens done. And that has done wonders for their economy. And while natural gas isn't the cleanest fuel, it definitely is a transition fuel to get us from where we are today to a cleaner future. And so I would love to see some of those projects get built.
You spoke as well about incentives to environmentally clean industries. Well, I think a big part of Justin Trudeau's industrial legacy will be the big subsidies offered to makers of electric batteries and companies in the EV space. Big investments in Ontario and Quebec, subsidized investments by big players. What's your view of that? It was, at the time, it seemed like an arms race where Canada had to match what was going on in the United States.
Yeah, it feels like often the government is a little bit ahead of its time, and I think over time, really, it'll be shown that building the capacity for those types of investments was the right move. And so I think just getting these things built is a wonderful thing, and it will position Canada to be very competitive on the world stage, whether it's supplying companies like Tesla or anyone else who needs battery and solar technology.
So we are not too far from an election. Mark Carney has officially declared today as a leadership candidate for the Liberal Party. Pierre Poilievre, of course, has staked out his positions reasonably clearly, bluntly, but reasonably clearly. What kind of industrial policy would you like to see in a future Canadian government?
Well, when I look at our country, we've talked about being in a productivity crisis or a productivity emergency. And a lot of that is because compared to countries like the United States, Canadian firms don't invest as much in research and development, in intellectual property, and in equipment, and in manufacturing machinery and automation. So I think really continuing to invest in those kind of things will put our country in a much better place. So I'd love to see some policies that encourage businesses, both small and large, to do that. And on the topic of businesses, there are so many small and medium-sized businesses in Canada, and there was a CFIB study that recently estimated that about $2 trillion worth of business assets will be available for transition from one generation to the next in the next decade. But something like 90% of those companies don't have a succession plan. And so anything that policy can do to help the transition of those businesses into new hands, into Canadian hands, that will help keep these manufacturing and distribution jobs in Canada, I think would be wonderful for business.
Iggy, thank you again for joining us today. Iggy Domaglaski is Chief Executive Officer of Wajax.